Last week on Insects for Fun, we talked about centipedes, so it only makes sense that this week on episode 88, we talk about millipedes. Today, we're going to look at the differences between millipedes and centipedes, along with the millipede basics. Millipedes are related to centipedes in that they belong to the same subphylum, Myriapoda, which means many legs, but they're actually in a different class from centipedes called Diplopoda. Diplopoda means double foot, which makes sense for millipedes because they do in fact have 2 pairs of feet for every body segment, unlike centipedes which only have 1. That's a lot of legs, but it's not a million, which is what you'd think based on the name. The funny part is milli isn't even Latin for million, it's actually Latin for thousand, and up until 2020, no millipede was known to have 1,000 or more legs. In 2020, however, a millipede with over 1,000 legs was discovered in a borehole on a mining expedition in Western Australia, almost 200 feet under the Earth's surface. This quote-unquote true millipede has been named Eumillipes Persephone. Persephone from the Greek goddess of the underworld, which makes sense because it was found so far underground. There are roughly 12,000 known species of millipedes, organized by around 140 families between 16 orders, which is much more than centipedes, and they can be found all over the world, except for Antarctica. Shocker, I know. What is kind of shocking though is that they can be found as far north as the Arctic Circle. Both millipedes and centipedes can survive in the colder conditions of the Arctic by burrowing underground, and millipedes have 3 different techniques for burrowing depending on their body shape. Number 1 is bulldozing. This technique is about as straightforward as it gets. The millipede pushes its head into the ground and carves out a path by simply moving forward and pushing dirt aside. It's used by your standard cylindrical millipedes. Great examples would be the giant American millipede or the giant African millipede, which are both common pets. The next technique on our list is wedging. Wedging is a bit more involved because the millipede shoves its head into a small opening and then uses its back to push up and make the crack wider. This technique is used by flat-backed millipedes in the order Polydesmida. This is actually the largest order of millipedes, which has over 3,000 species, and some of the coolest looking ones in my personal opinion, like the dragon millipede or the Kentucky flat millipede, which looks like it just crawled out of magma. These millipedes have flat backs as you'd expect, and honestly look kind of similar to centipedes. Number 3, boring. This final technique is used by millipedes in the order Polyzonaida, and it involves the millipede entering a small hole or crack and widening it through forward motion. It's not unlike the bulldozing technique, but the reason it's called boring is because the millipedes that do this have a smaller head than their midsection, and they can bore into small existing holes and cracks and then widen them thanks to their body shape. Think of them as like nails with legs. Unlike centipedes, there's some decent variation in the body shapes of millipedes, as we've seen thus far. There's actually an order of millipedes called pill millipedes, and they look almost identical to pill bugs. They only have 11 to 13 body segments and are able to roll up into a ball just like pill bugs. Something different though is that these millipedes can excrete a liquid from their backs to deter predators, and this is not something pill bugs can do. This isn't the only small order of millipedes though. There's another group called bristle millipedes which only have up to 17 pairs of legs. And if we do some math, that means they only have up to 8 or 9 body segments total. These are different from other millipedes because they're soft. They don't have a hard exoskeleton, and they don't have any chemical defenses either. So, what do? They use detachable bristles that are found on each segment of their body. Also, unlike many other millipedes, these are often parthenogenetic. And even if they aren't, the males usually just drop off a spermatophore the way centipedes do for females to pick up. So let's do a quick recap on different body shapes in millipedes. We have the classic cylindrical millipedes, the flat millipedes, pill millipedes, which look like pill bugs, bristle millipedes, which are small, soft, and bristly, and we've also got the flattened and ribbon-like bodied millipedes in the order Polyzonaida. That's 5 unique body types seen in millipedes, which definitely has centipedes beat. Another feature which we kind of touched upon that's different from centipedes is that millipedes usually have direct intercourse, where males use gonopods to transfer spermatophores into the female. Females also rarely watch over their young, and the eggs are generally just deposited and left in soil or detritus. Some millipedes make a silken cocoon for their eggs or even make a nest, but that's not super common. Another major difference between millipedes and centipedes is that millipedes are mostly detritivores and feed on decaying matter. Sometimes fluids from plants too. Some are omnivorous and occasionally carnivorous, but they're not apex predators like centipedes. And they aren't very fast either. Millipedes are generally slow movers and prefer to be underground as opposed to running around above ground or in trees. There are exceptions, of course, like millipedes that feed primarily on leaf litter above ground or the more carnivorous ones, but the carnivorous millipedes only feed on smaller arthropods like springtails or worms. And I'm saying or because, as you know, worms are not arthropods. The life cycle for millipedes begins as an egg, which hatches in a few weeks, and the adults grow by adding body segments in each molt up until they're fully mature. Some of them can keep adding segments after sexual maturity, but that's generally rare, and the growth slows incredibly. Think back to the lobster problem with continued growth. It takes more and more energy to do this as they increase in size. As for how long they can live, well, that depends on the species, of course, but many of them live for quite a long time. Up to 10 years, in fact. This is generally true for the larger millipedes that are cared for in captivity, like the giant African millipede and the giant American millipede we mentioned earlier. The average lifespan for the giant African millipede seems to be longer than the American one though, with the median between 7 and 10 years and the max being up to 12. Wild millipedes live less because of less stable environments and of course predators. The common predators for these animals are lizards, amphibians, birds, and other arthropods. They're eaten by mammals too, of course, but this is more of a common occurrence in parts of the world that have exceptionally large millipedes. Actually, it's currently believed that lemurs in Madagascar use millipedes as a form of medicine and even topical ointment to treat and prevent infections from nematodes. One of the millipedes' defense mechanisms is to release chemicals that deter and cause harm to other smaller animals, like arthropods and worms. It's exactly these kinds of chemicals that lemurs and other primates want to use as ointment to protect themselves. The primary defense mechanism seen in millipedes is the action of curling or coiling up when provoked. This is naturally the best way to save themselves from smaller predators because of how strong their outer shell is. But it also makes millipedes easier to slip out of another animal's grip and roll off on the ground, hopefully to be lost and left alone. Something really cool I discovered is that some millipedes actually have strong relationships with ants and are able to live in ant colonies. The genus Brachycybe contains small flat-backed millipedes, and some of them exclusively live in ant colonies. They get protected and provide ants with a way to break down organic waste. This genus of millipede also has another rare trait, which is paternal care. The males of these often guard their eggs until they hatch. The species that don't live with ants are usually found under rotting logs or stumps because they primarily feed on fungi. If you find yourself thinking you might want one as a pet, you can definitely find them at reptile expositions like centipedes or through online sales. I've never actually seen them for sale in Japan, and I don't think they're that popular over here, but I have seen quite a few videos of people in Western countries showing off their millipede companions. The care is similar to that of a centipede minus the live feeding part, because millipedes again mostly feed on decaying matter, like rotting wood, worm castings, decaying leaves, and even feces from other animals, like deer for example. They do prefer to be kept moist though, because the vast majority are unable to regulate water loss. And that's gonna wrap up the episode. Please make sure to rate and leave a review if you enjoy the show. It really makes a difference and helps keep the show growing. Our Discord community seems to be coming alive as well, which is fantastic, and you can join that by finding the link in the show notes. If you can't get enough of insects for fun or want to show more support, please find the Patreon page where you can choose between 3 tiers. Tier 1 gets you ad-free episodes among some other smaller perks. Tier 2 and above grants access to bonus episodes covering a wide variety of insect-themed topics and discoveries, and Tier 3 gets access to vlogs of my outdoor adventures and insect rearing. Thank you, as always, for listening.